forward to seeing
Speaking
that.
of Hollywood, I want to ask a political question after this question, but I want to speak about Hollywood for a second because it involves AI. Apparently, there are a group of actors and other big players in Hollywood that are trying to get the United States federal government to create some type of legislation which will protect their image and likeness so it cannot be reproduced by
Right.
artificial intelligence. And in the past few days, there's been a fairly well-known graphic artist who has made the same case, saying that his graphic art has been lifted by chat GPT, and I have such a hard time saying chat GPT for some
I think
reason.
we need
I
to
can't
park you
do
in
it.
front of some
I don't
Sesame
know
Street
why.
episodes.
It doesn't rhyme off the tongue
Yeah.
very easily. But anyhow, I want to ask you, I know what your opinion is on this, that you would probably want the artist protected. I would too. But I think it brings up a bigger question about everything everybody puts into a computer, all written text, all articles, all data, because we're all using the same sources. We're all using the same archiving giants, basically, when we're using our computers, Microsoft, Google,
Mhm.
things like that.
Well, so yeah, this has been going on for a while. There are between 60 and 70 different lawsuits and courtroom proceedings that are weaving their way through the courts. Some of them will wind up in the Supreme Court. So this will get sorted starting this year. The problem is that with large learning models, which is what ChatGPT is, they grab onto any kind of data that it can possibly find anywhere. So when people are, uploading content to the internet, it is drawing from that. Well, there's certain parameters that it can't draw from or whatever. I don't, but you
Unless
have
unless you have your information on its own server
right.
and you're posting things, it's more difficult for these big archiving giants to take your data and store it.
Right. So that's the issue. And you see it now with companies like Amazon and others, places where you can upload your own media, your own art, let's say, whether it's
Mhm.
written word or it's something drawn or painted, where they ask you because they're trying to protect themselves. They're asking, okay, was any of this done through AI? And if so, what percentage of it was done through AI? They're trying to protect themselves to be able to say down the line, oh no, we were trying to, protect ourselves and make sure that we're not posting anything. Because if some of these lawsuits go south for the AI companies, then these
Mhm.
platforms can get caught in the middle where it's like, aha, here's how much material you've been selling, and now this lawsuit just went a different direction than where you were hoping. So a lot of this is from artists to platforms to others. They're just sort of they're putting their flag in the sand and they're saying, okay, we're going to do something about this. We've got to figure this model out, and it'll get figured out. Anytime there's a big game changing thing for
Yeah,
any industry, it goes through this kind of thing.
we agree on this completely. Okay. But I'm here to say that this is a much bigger issue, and I'm glad that it's actors who might have some voice and people might listen to because there's celebrities regarding copyright issues, because this will affect people that create graphics, data. It will it
Yeah,
is an issue, if
yeah,
you think about it, that has existed in the music industry for years, because the better lawyers that you have, the better chance you have of winning a lawsuit when you're
right,
brought to or in front of a judge and asked why your song sounds like a
right,
song from 50 years ago or 20
right.
years ago. And good lawyers use this word called interpolation,
Mm-hmm.
which literally means taking one thing and making it different. Okay. And in a sense, that's what they argue with music, that, well, the song that we created was used as a different interpretation of the original song. Therefore, we are creating something new and cannot be held to a copyright infringement.
Well, that you're describing fair use laws. So you can
Yeah.
use a certain amount of somebody else's creative vision as long as you don't as long as it falls under certain categories. Like if you're doing it for humor as part of a joke or something like that, you're allowed to use it. But if you're creating a new kind of art, you're very restricted and limited you might recall, like in the 90s, where hip hop sampling started happening, and they started pulling
all the time.
things out of other songs. Van Halen went crazy, and they sued all these people for doing it, and ultimately it got itself worked out. And there are rules. You can use like a certain beat that somebody did in the 70s or
Yeah.
whatever, and reinterpret
My
it.
point is that it comes down to who has the most money and the best lawyer. Okay, but let's talk about litigation here in a different manner. About a week and a half ago, I got an email from someone on LinkedIn. Won't say who the name is, but they were trying to sell me something called a litigation finance fund. And basically, what they were trying to do was get me to back basically a fund that a law office is in essence creating, buying basically like an investment portfolio on the litigation that they're going to bring forth over, I guess, some period of time,
Interesting.
and that I would get a reward monetarily by giving them money, backing their litigation, and profit from it. And
So
I thought, I have never
that
heard about this
is
before, but
fascinating.
apparently it has been around for a handful of years now. I don't know how successful it is, but because of all these AI lawsuits and all the lawsuits that are coming from the Trump administration and anti Trump people, I
Mm-hmm.
think we're entering a litigation extravaganza right now. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that maybe it is a good time to invest in litigation finance funding.
Who'd have thought litigation could become a commodity? All content on the Risk Reward Show is for entertainment purposes only and not to be construed as financial advice. The hosts are idiots. They don't know what they're doing. They're not financial advisors. Come on, they just walked in from the street. Investments involve risk, so please consult a qualified professional before making decisions. It's
It's
genius.
wild. I never considered it even, and
Well,
I was flabbergasted when I started reading through the proposal that this guy was sending me, and I was like, I don't would not want to be part of it. However, it probably is profitable for some people if they bet on the right horses.
yeah, I guess you'd be having to bet on the law firm's track record that is putting that opportunity up.
Yeah,
And then if
absolutely.
it's successful, then it'll be interesting to see what happens with other law firms copycatting that. Because I could see a lot of ambulance chasing firms that specialize in that kind of stuff. Because a lot of that's low hanging fruit.
And if you think about it, you're bankrolling their capacity to do more investigation regarding their lawsuits,
Yeah,
making them stronger in
right.
essence.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting. Something to keep an eye on. Yeah.
Let's circle back to politics now. I'm sure you noticed this week that Canada has called an early election and Australia has now called an early federal election. And that election, I believe, will be in early May. So, my point here about this, and I'd like your opinion, are the governments in charge in Canada and the government in charge in Australia calling the election now because they believe they can both beat the conservatives now due to the fact there's going to be a Trump backlash from their own constituency that is watching Trump and is getting irritated in Canada and Australia. Now, the reason why I ask is because both these parties that are in charge in Canada and Australia have not been well liked over the last year. Trudeau resigned from office. Carney's in charge there. Albanese is in charge of the Australian government, and his approval rating is, I don't want to say rock bottom, but it's very low. And the so-called Conservative Party in Australia, which is known actually as the Liberal Party, but I don't want to confuse anyone listening, thought they had an easy chance to win an election the next go around. But now, because of Trump being in office, has he pissed off citizens of other nations so much that parties that have been unpopular for the last year have called early elections and have a chance to win?
I think you're right. I
Opinion?
mean, if you look at the evidence, that's the biggest thing that's changed the game geopolitically in the last 6 months. And all of the prime ministers that you mentioned, or both of those parties rather that you just mentioned, have are largely coming off of the Biden administration, which was very much about everybody working together to try to keep peace or further political agendas or so on. Well, now that Trump is coming in and he's saying, we want to be isolationist more or less, all of a sudden, the deck chairs have to get rearranged in both those countries and also in England. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that in the UK, especially since the Keir Starmer is very unpopular there right now. And I know people over there who are just like, they've already had it with him. So yeah, I mean,
I think that these election results in April and May from Canada and Australia will be interesting, and we'll see how the results reflect what public opinion is, obviously. And I'm wondering if the governments in power win, how Trump will take that, and will he be able to admit to himself that this is a repudiation of the way he goes about things diplomatically. And I'm being generous when I use the word diplomatic. But if the Conservatives win in Canada, and if the Liberal Party in Australia, which is conservative, wins, will Trump grow even more bold? I think he would.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah. But what we really need to see is a referendum in Greenland. That's where all eyes are right now.
Okay, so before we get back to Greenland, or go up to Greenland, depending on your geographical point of view, let's talk about the Canadian dollar and Australian dollar, the implications for both these currencies over the next month. The Canadian dollar and Australian dollar have both been struggling, and they've been struggling for a while now. And depending on the outcome of this election, the Canadian dollar and Australian dollar will certainly also be getting backing, or shall we say, being voted on by financial institutions. Greenland, do you have a question, a point? I have something I have written down specifically about Greenland, something that
Go
Mr.
right
Trump,
ahead. I have nothing on
President
Greenland that we
Trump,
haven't covered
did
before.
say this week, and I'm quoting, wow, it's amazing. Greenland, we're going to have it. He literally said that. And I'm listening to that. And again, I'm here
Everyone
for
hates
the
us so much now.
entertainment purposes. I'm here to assess the risk that all of this brings us. And I'm listening and thinking, oh my, this is not how a president is supposed to talk. Now, I should know better. I should know that this is how Trump talks.
Yeah, see, I remembered. Nobody else seems to have. I remember from the last time.
It's just amazing to me that he would use that vocabulary. We're going to have it. Like, he's sitting in a garage playing poker.
Yeah, he is. He's playing poker, but he has the nuclear launch codes instead of a hand of cards. The Risk Reward Show is a co-production of Angry Metatraders and Leitmotiv Press. It is produced by Scott Summer and Robert Petrucci and engineered by Scott Summer and Sagi Nizri. Music is by All Good Folks, a group of composers based in London that you should definitely check out. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts, as we're everywhere, like the gods we are.